Hi everybody! It's time for another What We Read video where we talk about some of our recent reads. Recent-ish reads.
Yeah, what we read, basically. Pretty much just all of that. Alright,
anyway, we'll
kick it off?
Right off. I'm going to start with a book called Battle Royal, which is by Lucy Parker, and this is one that I got from review via NetGalley. And this is basically about a whimsical baker named Sylvie Fairchild and a classic royalty favored baker named Dominique de Vere, and they find themselves head to head in a competition that will determine which one of them will bake the cake for the upcoming nuptials of the crown princess. 3 most important things you need to know about this book. Because I have a major sweet tooth, I really loved all the baking and the food parts of this story. There were a lot of like fun pastry scenes, a lot of mentions of sweet chocolatey things, and I was right there for it. I also quite enjoyed seeing our main characters sort of get to know more about each other. Their personalities are very distinct. It might have felt a little touch too contrived when it came to their extreme opposite personalities, or as they're being portrayed, really. Right. But all in all, it was still fun to read for the A plot, the B plot, and the C plot of this story. The romance, the rivalry, and the C plot, which we won't talk about because it's kind of something that unfolds within the story. Unlike Lucy Parker's other work, however, this book kind of felt a little off when it came to the pacing. I felt like the beginning was good, and then the middle kind of dragged on for a bit, and then it picked up towards the end. And I wish that it kind of had been condensed a little bit more. I feel like I would have, you know, felt a little more engaged than I otherwise did with the story. It's still a solid read. I'd still recommend it if you're interested at all in the premise, but not my favorite of her work, unfortunately. The next book that I'm going to talk about is The Pickup, which is by Miranda Keenely. So this one is about 2 teenagers, Mari and TJ. They end up meeting because they take a rideshare to the same music festival. Okay, and so they have this whirlwind weekend where they have to figure out how they're going to move forward in their own lives, but also if they're going to be able to move forward together in a relationship. Maybe, maybe not. Right. As usual with Miranda's other works, it's also true of this one. It was very compulsively readable. There's just something about the way that she writes that is really, really easy to digest and to just like devour in a matter of hours, really, which I always appreciate about her stuff. And I also really enjoyed the music festival parts. Even though there weren't that many, I actually thought it was going to be more heavily focused on the festival itself, but it actually isn't. A large chunk of the book actually just focuses on Chicago and this, you know, like the different things you can see and do there, and it kind of made me want to go to Chicago, so I'm gonna give it credit for that as well. Cool. I do think that the book was a little too short for what it was trying to accomplish. I don't mind books where conceptually the timeline or the time frame is a bit short, like in this case it was 3 days. That's fine. Like, stories like that are also very entertaining. They generally tend to be fast-paced. They're usually really suited for a more visual medium, I think, but I also don't mind reading them in books. I mean, I am a big fan of like 24-hour stories. Those can be real fun too. Unfortunately with this one, like, it was hard to get any intimacy with the characters because the timeline was so quick and you're following 2 of them, not just 1. Right. So it felt like we were just scratching the surface really of who they were and what they were struggling with. Fair. And some of their struggles were a lot heavier than I anticipated, which also didn't lend itself well to this particular kind of story, I guess, and like the time frame that it had. So for me, that was actually something that really brought down the book a bit, even though overall at the end of the day it was a very solid YA read. That one I also got through NetGalley, by the way. And then we have Anna K. Away, which I got through Libra FM's audiobook advanced listening copies program for some influencers. If you feel like checking out Libra FM, there's a link down below. Great for audiobooks and also a way to support your indie bookstores. But Anna K. Away is the sequel to Anna K. A Love Story. Sure. And after all of the drama and the difficulties that occur in the first book, Anna and her peers find themselves having a pretty life-changing summer where they're dealing with the ups and the downs and the emotional runarounds that they've had to go through. I was about to try and get into the drama, and then I realized it's so convoluted that you're just gonna have to read it if you're at all interested. So if you're in the mood for a story that is chaotic and messy and characters that don't necessarily make the greatest life choices, this might actually be the book for you, much like the previous book in the series was. I was surprised though, because unlike the first book where it really is heavily focused more on the dramatic turns of events and the different relationships that crop up between the characters, this one has, I guess, a little more introspection, especially on the part of Anna, who is our main character. She's really grieving in the story and working through that grief. And yes, she doesn't always make the right choices because of the grief, but it's surprisingly emotional to see her going through all of this and like coming, well, you'll find out if she comes through to the other side.
Sure.
Right? I also was just in the right mood for like the level of over-the-top drama this story takes, because these are like teenagers with ridiculous amounts of privilege and money. And of course that opens a lot of doors for them, right? And they get to do a lot of things that normal people wouldn't do. Also means they feel like they can get away with making all sorts of choices that might be questionable in other scenarios or cases.
Or ever, really.
But it was fun. I honestly had no idea what direction it was going to take, and it does get a little too much for me towards the end. Almost goes into soap opera level territory, which isn't always my cup of tea, but it was fun. And I also really enjoyed listening to Jenna Ushkowitz narrate the story. I think she did a great job. Content warnings were listed in my Goodreads review. You can check that out. Definitely look them up before you pick up the book, because
they're worth
something.
They're worth looking into.
Yes,
I wanna say.
for sure. But those are the first 3 books I'm going to talk about today, and now we'll turn things over to Mackie real quick.
So behold, and only because I really wanted to feature these, because these are some of the books in Alexa's collection that are my personal favorites, which I probably never told you, but I do love this tiny little palm-sized Throne of Glass saga like books, which by the way I have read, not these obviously because I can't these are lovely, but you know, these are just really more for display than anything else. I want to say maybe a couple of what we reads ago I have mentioned that I have finished with Assassin's Blade, which is a great place to start apparently, and Throne of Glass, and of course Crown of, I really love doing this by the way, and Crown of Midnight. Tiny, it's like they're cards but they're full books, which leaves us with the rest of the saga, the chunkier, crazier, more insane bits of the story. And Heir of Fire all the way to, you know, we've got Heir of Fire, well, let's just talk about them, all of them, right, because they're so cute. Heir of Fire right here, Queen of Shadows, which is just lovely, and then you've got Empire of Storms, what a ride that one was, Tower of Dawn, I have so many thoughts, most of them good, and of course Kingdom of Ash, which is the last book, and which was what devastated mostly the entire fandom in many ways that can be said. So for those of you who have been following Sarah J Maas and who have been following Alexa and following Sarah J Maas, this is not new to you. This is new to me. So for those of you who haven't been doing that, well, here I am. So here we go. Let's talk characters. The incredibly, wonderfully, kind of morally gray. You can't really put like a little plumb line as to whether they lean 100% good or 100%. There are no clear traditional heroes and villains here among the humanoids. Yes, because it's true though. I mean, for the non-humans, it's pretty good. That's the word. Go ahead. But as to the humanoids of this entire thing, nobody's like just all good or all bad. They're such a delightful blend of gray. Sarah specializes in that, and I, for one, can stand others more than the others. Some of them are a pill, some of them are a trip, some of them are a pill and a trip. Like say, oh, I don't know, title character, you know, little Miss Sardothian over here, who we find out is more to just her assassin's name than she actually really is. So without actually spoiling that, our favorite assassin in Aderlin has come into her own and understood so many new things, met so many people, and it is really great. So I think she masters, and by she I mean Sarah, masters that line between what is, you know, good and what is not good, and what is, and packages it together to make it what is real. And I think that's true. People are that complicated. A couple of other notes on, this will be part 1 of my little review. I also want to talk about the story.
Okay. Now
the story, I think, is really, interestingly enough in hindsight, very well paced, personally, because it's a saga. It's not one of those one and done type, like those 24-hour stories, or it's not one of those, the solstice is coming and therefore we must... No, this sort of has its own life. There's a, you know, in fact, I was actually thinking a lot of Game of Thrones, reading this thing, only because of the morally gray characters, and the fact that there are so many sort of like players on the field that you almost kind of don't know how they're going to, you know, find how their loyalties can align themselves until a larger threat sort of presents itself. So as far as, is the threat real? Are the players on the board even aware of said threat? Are they going to, stop snarling at each other for 8 seconds to figure out that, hey, the bad guy's over here. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that very, very much. For somebody who sort of loves kind of like the modern-ish fantasy light, I want to say. That's probably not the best words, but it's definitely not high fantasy, where we talk for like 8 pages on just like, this is the nature of this tree, or this chair came from that particular kingdom in the last 700 years. Without any of that, and straight into the heart of just such real and I would say believable characters. I believe these people are nobody's pretending to be anything here, at least not on purpose. So very, very, very real about that. So I kind of want to end part 1. Part 2, I guess, would have to be sort of like the lore, which I do want to sort of like talk about, and then I guess the writing style, because those two are really, really important to me. And I think without these other 2 things, the characters and the narrative itself just would fall flat. So this is like, you really stand on these 4 legs. It would be fun to talk about Sarah's writing style and the lore she's built around this, because I feel like those are at the core of what makes this story work.
I'm gonna finish by talking about 2 rom-coms, romances. The first one is going to be The Love Hypothesis, which is by Ali Hazelwood. This is coming out from Berkeley. Quick summary of this is that after a spontaneous, panic-induced kiss between them,
sure,
Olive and Adam make an agreement to start fake dating because it will benefit them both. And then, obviously, it starts to become more real than either of our fake dating participants ended up thinking it would be.
Because there was only one bed?
Was there?
Sorry.
Okay, so one of the things I enjoyed the most about this is that there is a heavy emphasis on academia, specifically STEM. So it was interesting just to see these 2 characters who are so heavily involved in like their own research, their own presentations, and to see, you know, the academic setting as well. That was really interesting to me, and especially because it's like graduate studies, not just like regular college or high school. It's like something completely different from what I would normally read. So I definitely had fun like seeing it through their eyes. Also, the author herself has a PhD, which is
very
pretty
nice.
Cool. The other thing that I liked a lot about this was the writing. It was really compulsively readable. I know I said that already earlier in this video, but there's just this style of writing, or this method of writing, that is really easy for me to devour. Like once I start reading it, it just goes by like that once I start it. So I definitely enjoyed that. And she's also really good at integrating a lot of very funny very rom-com moments into this one. There are some that really had me cackling out loud because they're just over the top funny, but in a way that really worked for the story. I think what frustrated me about this book is that the obstacles that they encounter in their romance, while some of them were believable and I'm like totally fine, there were some where I was just like, I'm really frustrated with where this is going, because it was deliberate ignorance and miscommunication between the 2 characters. And while I can, you know, accept that to a certain extent as, you know, real and relatable, there comes a point where I'm like, please, come on, it's really obvious. Like it's right there. Like they basically told you what they are thinking, and you're the one who's just like, I don't believe you. So it rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. So towards the end of the book, I was getting very, very frustrated with a lot of things that were going on. I mean, I still overall ended up enjoying it because I was invested enough to see if Olive and Adam were going to be able to work things out. And you know, at the end of the day, that's the most important thing to me about any romance. It's that I'm invested enough in the main couple, so that I care. Yeah. Like to the point where I care if they get, you know, they're happy for now, they're happy ending. So overall, pretty good debut. I would still recommend checking it out, especially if the premise sounds up your alley. And the last book I'm going to be talking about today is You Had Me at Hola by Alexis Daria.
Cute.
This came out last year, and this is a celebrity romance, which is not something I would normally read, but I ended up choosing it for our family book club, and we had a lot of fun. So this is about Jasmine, who is, you know, looking to be a leading lady, a future leading lady, and so she wants to follow her leading lady plan because she was involved in a pretty messy, very public breakup scandal. She is going to be starring in a new television series, and it just so happens that her co-star is a very well-known actor named Ashton, and he, on the other hand, is also dealing with his own thing where he wants to continue, you know, keeping his career thriving, but also keep his personal life out of the public eye. Their growing feelings for each other and their close proximity kind of throw a wrench into all of their plans to, you know, follow the course they set for themselves at the start of the book. What I really enjoyed about this particular romance is that there's a huge family aspect to the story on both sides. So Jasmine has a huge family, and she's particularly close to some members of the family that are, you know, coming through for her and there for her a lot of the time. Meanwhile, Ashton has a family of his own, and he's trying to do his best to take care of them, but also make sure that they don't, you know, feel any of the terrible things or the terrible effects that could happen from him being such a famous personality. He's concerned about their safety, he's concerned about their privacy, and those things are very, very, you know, a big central part of the story. I also enjoyed the celebrity aspects more than I anticipated. I think it was just fun to like sort of be behind the scenes on the set and just like see how all of that was coming together. It reminded me a little bit of what it was like to be involved in theater, just because, I don't know, there's just like this feeling of family on a set and like how they all take care of each other, and it was just fun to see that, you know, come to play in this story. I also was very invested in the romance working itself out. I really wanted Jasmine and Ashton to find the happiness they deserved after everything that they've been through. And again, that was the thing that made this romance really work for me, because I cared whether or not they were gonna get to where I wanted them to get. I will say though, I think I would have had a very different experience if I had read this one physically. What I did instead was listen to the audiobook, which was so much fun, and it just tied in so well because it's a celebrity romance and it's kind of also on the set of a TV show, so to sort of hear that all narrated just made it feel like it was coming to life even more for me than it would have if I had just read it in the pages of a book. So I'm glad I finally read this one. Again, it's not a new favorite romance of all time, but it was definitely enjoyable for what it was. Will recommend picking it up if you like the premise as well. There you have it. Those are all of the books that we're talking about in today's What We Read video. If you've read any of them and have any thoughts or have any questions about any of them, feel free to leave a comment down below. You can also find all of our relevant social media links down there as well. And we'll see you guys with a new video soon. Bye!